Hey Internet, Adam Glass here. I'm starting something new, something I'm calling A Glass Can Only Spill What It Contains, after the Me Without You song. It's got my name in it. In this project, I'm going to be doing a bit of a reading rainbow, telling you about books I've read recently that struck me, had an impact on my worldview. The books where I underline a whole page, then write "wow" in all caps in the margin. Now, this may manifest as a review, as something more like a book report, or just me reading a passage I found particularly insightful. We'll see how it goes in the future, but here's episode 1. Defund the Police has been a rallying cry, especially these last 6 months, as millions of people around the US hit the streets to protest the continuing deaths of people, primarily African American men and women, at the hands of police. Defund the police is a contentious phrase, to be sure, but it is the child version of the more mature abolish the police. In the interest of putting childish things behind us, we have the first book I want to talk to you about. While much can and has been said on the non-religious reasoning of the Prison Abolition movement, see, for instance, 8 for Abolition, for a user-friendly introduction, the book I'm sharing comes at abolition from a particularly religious point of view, and a Christian point of view in particular. Lee Griffith's The Fall of the Prison, Biblical Perspectives on Prison Abolition. Griffith is an Anabaptist Christian, coming from the Church of the Brethren, which definitely sounds like the name of a cult if you're not familiar with it, right? Fortunately, I am familiar with it, as I grew up in the Grace Brethren tradition, an offshoot of the same branch of Protestantism as the Church of the Brethren. Griffith has written extensively on U.S. policy in light of the traditional pacifist nature of the Anabaptist movement, which, as Griffith points out in the introduction, is a laudable witness for peace by speaking out against participation in the military establishment of the state. In fact, Anabaptists have died in U.S. prisons for refusing to participate in wars, not only conscientiously objecting to service, but to any means of facilitating that service, while many conscientious objectors end up as, say, medics or road builders or any manner of other non-combat roles. Anabaptists have traditionally rejected anything and have gone to prison and died because of it. What Griffith goes on to point out is that while that stance is laudable, it comes with a simultaneous blessing, whether intentional or not, of the domestic military, police, jails, and prisons, end quote. He's also old hat to this. This book came out in 1993, while the crime bill and the contract with America were still twinkles in bipartisan eyes. And while Reagan's war on drugs kicked off an incredible increase in prison populations, it's particularly the legislation of 1994 that has made even more of a mess of the American prison system. The U.S. imprisons more people per capita than any other country on earth. In fact, a dozen or more states individually imprison more of their population per capita than any other nation on earth, by orders of magnitude. Griffith builds his argument for prison abolition on a literal interpretation of the teachings of Jesus as found in Christian scriptures, which he rightly calls scandalous, because the world Jesus calls his followers to build continues to be a stumbling block to the religious today. I was particularly struck by the last few paragraphs of chapter 3, Prisons and the Bible, and I'd like to share them with you in their entirety. What follows is a quote. For Christians, however, The effort to arrive at the biblical understanding of prisons and prisoners can never be based on an abstract theory about who is or is not a victim, nor on calculations about who was first victimized by whom. To listen for the word in the words of the gospel genuinely, we must first silence all of our noisy, media-fed images of prisoners and prisons, be those images good, bad, or indifferent. And above all, we must silence our technological scheming for solutions that really work, or for the alternatives that will be more humane. It is only by silencing these noises that we can really hear the stubborn biblical truth. Jesus was a prisoner. Abandoned by the apostles who claimed they would go with him to prison and to death, the prisoner Jesus was left with just 2 other criminals by his side, Luke 23:32. And yet, this prisoner was able to show love for both executioners and victims, Luke 23:34 and 43. He went to his death as a prisoner, but the imprisonment of Jesus does not even end with death. In the Gospel of Mark, the wrappings of Jesus' body are described in the same terminology used for the fettering of prisoners, Mark 15:46. A stone was rolled in front of the prison tomb, and Matthew says that guards were posted, 27:62-66. The prisoner on the cross was a prisoner even in death. The power of the prison is broken by resurrection. But the stubborn biblical truth has to do with far more than the historical fact that Jesus was a prisoner. Along with the fact that Jesus was a prisoner is the proclamation that Jesus is the prisoner. There can be no pretending that Jesus was only alongside the prisoners for a short time on the cross. Even before his arrest, in words that could be either joyful promise or harsh admonition, Jesus proclaimed that we do to him whatever we do to any and every prisoner, even the very least of them. The profound scandal of Matthew 25:31-46 cannot be overlooked. Jesus' Jewish faith emphasized the transcendent holiness of God. Even God's name was so unutterably holy that it was not to be pronounced. One could never hope to see the holy and transcendent God face to face. One could only see the burning bush or hear the voice on Sinai. In the wilderness, the ragtag group of former slaves could not see God. They could see only the pillar in the sky leading the way toward the promised land, Exodus 13:21-22. One does not see God. How much more amazing, then, is Jesus' teaching that the Lord is to be met in the naked and the hungry, the homeless and the sick, the prisoner and the social rejects. What Jesus was telling his disciples is that if you want to meet God face to face, the nearest you're going to come to it on this planet is to look into the faces of your sisters and brothers, and especially your sisters and brothers who have been declared unrighteous, unclean, and unacceptable. It is not that we find God there, it is that God finds us there. That is where our faith is nurtured and bears fruit. There, where we expect to meet monsters, we meet God instead. The opportunity to serve God lies there among the prisoners who have been reckoned to be least deserving of any service at all. So for the Christian, all talk of prisoners must begin and end with Christ Jesus. This is the position in which the Word places us. We are so placed that we cannot talk about prisoners without a recognition of Jesus, the prisoner. We are so placed that we cannot talk about prisoners without a clear recognition that it is precisely these men and these women who have a right to freedom, who have the only possible right to freedom. The right that is based in the word and activity of God. By placing us, the word demythologized all of our social realities. It is a scandal for all of us good, law-abiding citizens. We can no longer talk of people who are paying their debt to society. We must now talk of people who are robbed of their freedom. We can no longer talk of monsters who deserve to suffer. We must now talk of the call to serve Jesus by serving the least of the prisoners. Whether we hear them with joy or with fear and trembling, the word so places us that we must hear the words of Jesus. The good news is freedom for the prisoners. Wow.